Last time we saw that God has a problem with suffering, and that's a good thing. According to the Bible, God does not make his peace with a suffering world. Unfortunately, we do. Usually, human beings do not have the problem with suffering that we should. So for instance, if you believe in karma, you believe that all suffering is ultimately just, it's deserved, it's not technically a problem. To use the language of computer programming, suffering is not a bug, it's a feature.
It's similar if you believe in chaos. That is, if you believe that there is no ultimate power in charge of the cosmos. If you think everything is random, then nothing is wrong. And so once again, suffering and the deadly struggle for survival is not a bug, it's a feature. So with these natural human responses to suffering, karma and chaos, we don't have the problem with suffering we should, and in this episode, we'll see that we don't have the solution to suffering that we crave.
Karma says existence is suffering. That's the first of the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha taught. To eradicate suffering, we must first eradicate desire, attachment, but ultimately, in order to eradicate suffering, we must ourselves be eradicated, eliminated. If we follow the Eightfold Path, the future is nirvana, but nirvana means being blown out, like an extinguished candle. Suffering will end because I, as my particular self, will end. I just dissolve into the ocean of being like a drop of water in the sea. I guess at that point there's no more suffering, but there's also no more me. Karma gives no real solution to suffering, not for me or for this world.
Chaos also has no future. If our suffering is just random, who's to say it'll ever get any better? Of course, we can kid ourselves that the future's bright, resolutely enduring through any suffering, all the while singing the sun will come out tomorrow. But deep down we know there'll come a point when either we'll have no tomorrow or the sun will go supernova, whichever comes first, thereby rendering the whole of our and humanity's existence completely pointless and insignificant. But hey, the new Star Wars movie's out soon, so that's something to look forward to, isn't it?
Could be worse. How? Could be raining.
Often people say, if Jesus is really God, why doesn't he do something about suffering? Actually, he's the only one committed to solving the problem of suffering.
But here's the way Christ gives us a future. His answer to suffering is not to magic it away, he enters it to transform it from the inside. He is the God who takes responsibility for this broken world. He anchors himself to the world and suffers its brokenness himself. Then, on the far side of suffering and death, he rises up from within the world as the first fruits of a whole new creation, raised up on the pattern of his resurrection. You might ask, why isn't God doing something about this suffering world? Well, he is. And this is what he's doing. He's not magicking away pain from on high. He enters it to transform it from the inside. And he's working that process out, drawing more and more people into spiritual new life, so that one day he will bring the world into physical new life.
That's why in Mark 13, Jesus says, there will be earthquakes in various places and famines. These are the beginning of birth pains. See how Jesus refers to those disasters? Birth pains, not death throes. A woman goes through the pain of childbirth and at the end there's new life. First comes the pain, then the new life. That's what it's like for the world, and that's what it's like for us, because that's what it was like for Jesus. Jesus experienced suffering, then glory, the cross, then the crown. That was his path, and it's our path too. Right now the world is like an acorn falling into the ground. One day it will be an oak tree, raised up to new life.
This world is filled with suffering now. It's in its birth pains. But when Jesus returns, there will be a rebirth, a new life. And we know this will happen because on Good Friday, Jesus experienced the full force of God's wrath against sin. The greatest suffering was inflicted on the greatest person. But then on Easter Sunday, there was new life, a new birth, a resurrection. The greatest suffering brought the greatest glory. On the cross, Jesus takes all of the suffering of this world and transforms it into glory. What is God doing about suffering? He is transforming it from the inside into a future hope that literally no one else is offering.
In the middle of suffering, it can feel like there's no solution, like there could be no solution. But it's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo.
The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. This shadow, even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Furrow, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam?
What are we holding on to? Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Whatever suffering you face, look to the cross and ask whether you can trust this suffering God. And then look to the empty tomb and ask if you can trust this risen Lord. What is God doing with your suffering? More than you could possibly imagine.
Thanks for watching this week's Thorny Question. That was the second part in our series on suffering. We'll be back next week with another look at suffering in a bit more depth. So please come and join us then. If you enjoyed any of our content, then please give us a like on Facebook or subscribe on YouTube. And don't forget to share it out to your friends and people that you know. And do join us on Tuesdays for our live cast at lunchtime, where we'll be talking about these videos in a bit more depth.